Did you know that you can pay your mortgage just by talking about dinosaurs?
There were like paleontology podcasts, but no dinosaur specific podcasts.
And then Sabrina's very ambitious, so she basically said, well, we could do it.
Garret was listening to a lot of podcasts. I like trying new things, so this could be a fun thing for us to do.
Garret and Sabrina, I am so excited to talk to you today. Clearly, do you really pay your mortgage by talking about dinosaurs? Because that's such an awesome job.
Yes, now we do.
It took a few years, but we got there.
Okay, so how did you start this project? How did you come up with this idea? I mean, clearly you're a dinosaur fanatic like I am, right?
Yeah, we loved dinosaurs as kids, but then kind of, moved on to other things, I guess, during the teenage years. And then when we started dating, actually it was 3 years into dating, we were living on the East Coast and we were going to the American Museum of Natural History in New York all the time, remembering how much we loved dinosaurs in the dinosaur hall. And at the time, there were like paleontology podcasts, but no dinosaur specific podcasts about what was going on, because there's a new dinosaur discovered every week. We're in a golden age of dinosaur discovery.
Yeah, we couldn't keep up. So we were looking for a podcast and we couldn't find one that was doing it. And then Sabrina's very ambitious, so she basically said, well, we could do it.
It was also a mix of like, we decided to have this dinosaur themed wedding and didn't want to stop talking about dinosaurs. So it was, kind of worked out.
You had a dinosaur themed wedding. I love it. I had a dinosaur themed baby shower.
Awesome.
Did either of you podcast before?
No. Sabrina had more background in relevant, important skills than I did, because she had worked as a journalist at a newspaper doing science journalism. So she kind of knew the types of ways you talk about science and, the things you want to cover. And I had listened to a lot of podcasts for quite a few years by that point. But no, neither of us had done anything with audio at that point. Oh, although you did work at a radio station briefly. So maybe you had done a little bit.
Interned. I don't know if that counts.
Yeah.
Well, I love your voices. They're very soothing and very informational, not, I don't know how I want to say that, but I like the way that you guys sound.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Why did you choose podcasting as your way to create if you didn't have any experience in podcasting beforehand? I mean, I'm not trying to, skewer you. I didn't have any experience either. I just grabbed a mic and started talking.
Well, we started with a website, right? Because Sabrina had done web design before.
After visiting AM&H so many times, we thought, there must be so many great dinosaur museums around the world. So we started this map on a website of all these different places to go. And now there's over 300. So we hope to get to all of them, but we'll see. And yeah, we did blog posts and everything, but podcasting was just really interesting. Garret was listening to a lot of podcasts. I like trying new things. So we decided, this could be a fun thing for us to do.
What were the startup costs and how did you fund it?
It was about $100 is a rough estimate.
How could you possibly fund that?
Yeah. Wouldn't necessarily recommend the approach we took, but we used just a laptop that we had. We used the built-in microphone, and then to record our interviews, we actually recorded into the microphone from the speakers of the laptop. There are better free ways to do it than that, but that's what we did because we didn't know what we were doing. We used a free Skype account. Then we paid about $10 a month for hosting, and that was pretty much it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I want to just kind of stop right here and say, if you have interest in starting a podcast, you really can get in there for almost nothing. Don't do it the way that they did it. My audio content creating heart is a little cringy right now when you were recording from the speaker.
Yeah.
But it's, there's great microphones out there for $50, I think. $25 gets you a decent mic, and a really good mic you can get for $50 or $75. You plug it in and you start talking. When
we got serious about it, we spent about $1,200, and that's when we got a couple of $250 mics. The Rode Procasters are what we were using. We got some mic stands, so they hold the mic up close to your face, and an audio interface to get the fancy mics to connect to the computer, and
pop filters.
Yeah, pop filters and headphones and some other accessories. And that really made a huge difference in our sound quality. So,
we don't like listening to our early episodes.
Yeah.
Same, but for different reasons. I sound like an idiot and I'm flubbing every line.
We did the same, yeah.
So what are some downsides that someone might not consider before jumping into podcasting?
It's a lot of fun, but it's not an overnight success kind of thing. Don't expect.
Wait, you didn't release one episode and suddenly you're rolling in the gold coins like Scrooge McDuck?
Oh, that'd be amazing. No, but yeah, you've got to make sure you're passionate about your subject because you're going to be talking about it for a long time and you want to have fun with it. Otherwise, you just get burned out and it feels like a drag and your audience can tell, and you don't want that. Nobody wants that.
I love that. Be passionate about your subject. I could very easily talk about dinosaurs forever. I talk about money and real estate, which I can do forever, as anybody who has ever listened to me can attest. So when did you start making money off of this, and how did you start making money off of this? And I am part of several podcasting groups, and I think this is the number one question I get and other people are asking in these groups is, how do I make money from podcasting?
The first thing we did was Patreon, which is sort of like an ongoing Kickstarter type thing where people pledge an amount per month and then they get something in return. Usually you can do Patreon as a just donation, like buy me a coffee sort of situation. Or you can give extra content. We give extra content for our patrons. And we started that about 6 months in. We got a few patrons very quickly. We started out with some family. You know, it's like your mom will give you a few dollars, like, yeah, you go get them, honey. And then, but when you start to get some patrons that you've never met in real life, that's when you start to feel like, oh, this is a real thing. I'm actually, people value this. It's not just friends of mine that want to support me. It's real people out there that appreciate what I'm doing. So that was amazing. And that happened pretty shortly after we started, a couple months into the Patreon.
Yeah.
And then
we actually probably could have started our Patreon even earlier. And that's something, like if we were starting today, you could just start your Patreon, but even before you launch the podcast, and start building up that community and treating it like a business.
Yep. And then we got our first sponsor not too long after that, when we were on a road trip visiting dinosaur museums around Canada, Montana, in the Western US. And one of our friends who was a marketing guru basically told us, well, while you're at those museums, you should ask them if they want to sponsor you. And we're like, oh yeah, that does make sense. And one of them did. And so that was our first sponsor, which was really amazing.
Yeah.
I'm just so excited that there's a dinosaur podcast. What is a reasonable expectation for income for the first year?
Yeah, we were thinking about that. We think it's probably $0. If you're talking about profit, if you're talking about like revenue, you can get some money coming in, but there are some hosting fees you're going to have to pay probably for some software to make your life easier. If you go fully free, which you can do, you could make, I don't know, a few $100s, but you probably would rather spend a few $100s on some software that will save you hundreds of hours and make $0. So I think it's maybe roughly breaking even for a year or two. It obviously depends on how lucky you get with your audience.
I think that's important. You do need to have listeners in order to have income. Do you think your niche helped your success, the fact that there weren't a lot of direct competitors when you started?
Definitely. We launched the podcast just a few months before Jurassic World came out, and that was a huge boost. And also Apple Podcasts was looking for dinosaur podcasts to feature at the time, so they reached out to us a little before the movie came out, and that made all the difference for us.
Okay. I have been podcasting for a long time, and Apple Podcasts is like, Mindy who? They have never reached out to me ever. Oh, that's so awesome. Okay, so what steps could you take to boost your chance of success besides having a niche that nobody else is covering and launching right before a giant movie and having Apple Podcasts reach out to you and ask if they could feature you? Yeah, Apple, you don't have to ask. Just go ahead.
Yeah.
Feature me whatever you want.
That was extremely lucky.
Yeah, there's definitely some luck involved there. You know, when you're starting out, yeah, niche down as much as you can to something that you're really interested in. Pick your keywords carefully too, so that people can find you. Like SEO is very important.
Yeah, because search engines for podcasts, in any podcast app, the search engine is terrible. The full name of our podcast is I Know Dino, the Big Dinosaur Podcast, because if we didn't have dinosaur in it, if you search for dinosaur, even though it's maybe the first word in our description, and it might be one of the top dinosaur podcasts out there, we wouldn't even show up because they're just simple text searches that basically only look at the title. So it's very important, like if you have a real estate podcast, you probably want to have real estate or housing or something in the title.
There, yeah.
Yeah, so that's a really big part of it. And then, like Sabrina was saying, yeah, you want to niche because there are now, I don't know, it depends on how you look at the number of podcasts, but millions to hundreds of thousands of podcasts. So there's probably somebody doing a podcast on whatever general topic you might be interested in. But if you can find your angle of it, then you can really find an audience that's more similar directly to you and your interests.
What was the most surprising thing that happened while you were building your show and building your audience?
Figuring out or finding out that there are adults like us who love dinosaurs, because a lot of people, when they talk about dinosaurs, they think, oh yeah, kids love dinosaurs. And it was really great to find our people.
Yeah.
You know, that is so important. Finding your community is so key. And it doesn't really matter what that community is. Finding other people who are like you learn from them, you get to teach them, you get to talk about this thing that, you know, other people in your life are like, I don't care. And here's other people who are like, I do care. I do want to talk about this, but I am overjoyed to find somebody who likes the same things that I do, knows these things, can pronounce the words correctly, knows that it's not brontosaurus, it's a patasaurus.
Yeah, it's very true, because the really cool thing about podcasting is it can be a really rare, uncommon passion that you won't find in your community. You might only know one other person or zero other people that are really in it in your day-to-day life. But just like, you know, you could go on Facebook or some social media thing and you could find that little group of people who are really into that specific thing. You can do the same thing with podcasting, and then it's your own community. And a lot of times there's the added piece of it, which is they like the way that you're interacting with that specific niche. So that can be another side of it. So like there are a lot of great podcasts now that are like women who blah, 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 because half of the population is women and almost all the podcasts about that are probably men doing it. So you could get a niche just doing something like that. There's a lot of different ways to niche down that can be really effective.
Mm-hmm. I love that answer. And I love that Garrett's the one saying it too. Okay, this isn't all sunshine and roses and rainbows and unicorns. What were some stressful things that happened?
Early on, we would record under a blanket to kind of... I see your reaction, yeah.
We lived near a freeway before we got new windows. We needed to reduce the sound somehow.
I used to live in a house with all wood floors, and you couldn't see it, but there were blankets and pillows all over the floor to cut the sound bounce, yeah.
Yeah, we'd get on like our couch or maybe on the floor and then put the blanket over our heads and start recording. And there's one time early on, we did a whole episode and we thought, oh wow, that one came out great. It was like after a few episodes in, so we're starting to get more confident and everything. And we get out from under the blanket and it's all hot and sweaty. Plus the blanket, you know, it's dark. So it's nice to be breathing fresh air. And then we realize, oh, we didn't hit the record button.
Yeah, back under we went.
Yep, did it all over again. Maybe it was just as good. I don't know.
I think it was a little better because it does help once you sort of get the rhythm of it. We definitely needed less edits and pauses and things the second round.
Depends what you're going for, I think. Yeah,
true.
You always tell yourself that, oh, it was better the second time, because you can't say it was better the first time.
That's true.
Every podcaster has forgotten to hit record at least once.
Yeah, and then in the back of my mind now, every time it's like, oh, we got to make sure, especially when we're interviewing somebody, because I don't want to have to ask them to re-record anything.
Yeah, we always have at least one backup, often two backups at this point.
You definitely need the extra because you don't want to miss it, because that one perfect line that they said the first time, they won't say the second time.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking for redoing, yeah.
And as you said that, I looked up, I'm like, are we recording?
Double
We
check.
are.
I did too, because we always record a backup as well.
Okay, so was that your biggest mistake, or do you have a biggest mistake that you'd like to share?
I mean, we've made a fair number of scientific mistakes over the years.
Especially in the beginning.
Yeah, so every time we'd make one of those, we would, if we got an email about it, we would just correct it, because science is all about making mistakes and learning from them. So we try to embrace that. We don't usually get argumentative and say like, no, you know, we're actually right. We'll look into it and make sure. And if we're wrong, then we fess up.
Our background's are not in paleontology, so there was a big learning curve in the beginning. And Mindy, maybe you're familiar with this debate between Triceratops and Torosaurus.
Isn't one like the baby of the other? Maybe,
Yep.
But we're not sure because it was like a billion years ago that they lived.
Yeah, you got it exactly right.
But it depends on who you ask.
Yeah.
I have been in this position where you say something and somebody's like, you're wrong. I'm like, well, I don't think I'm wrong. And then somebody else is like, no, you're right. And you're like, well, and each of them have backup. And you're like, let's agree to disagree. I was actually very proud of myself when I came to embrace the let's agree to disagree. But yes, you have a dinosaur podcast. At the time, it was the only dinosaur podcast. Are there other dinosaur podcasts that are similar?
They all have slightly different angles, I would say, and some are more seasonal. We do every week.
I think there might have been another dinosaur podcast when we started, or two, but they weren't weekly and like covering everything. So that was sort of our niche, was like, we're going to cover every single
New
dinosaur that is described, which is almost every week, which is partly why we wanted to do weekly. Yeah, now there are more, and I think we're still the only ones in that niche.
How many hours a week or month do you think you spend on Know Dino, the podcast?
It's our full-time jobs as of a couple years ago, and I'd say we are averaging full-time hours. We're working on being better about having weekends.
Yes. Yeah, we didn't have weekends because we had a baby 10 months ago. So for 10 months, we just worked all weekend. And now we're like, we're going to get weekends back.
Did you name your baby Torosaurus?
I don't think the baby would have liked that.
We were trying to find like a paleontologist name, but we couldn't agree on any of them. So yeah, we didn't, unfortunately. There's no paleo connection. And we also kind of felt like, what if they hate dinosaurs? Because it's 50-50 whether they're going to love dinosaurs or be like, that's my parents' thing and they're uncool and I don't want anything to do with them.
They're going to love dinosaurs.
I hope so.
Because if your house is anything like mine, there are dinosaurs everywhere.
There sure are.
So if you were going to start over from scratch, knowing what you know now, what would you do differently?
Things are different now in 2023 than they were in 2015 when we started. But I think I would try to build our audience before we launched. I mentioned before, like, we probably could have started our Patreon earlier. We probably could have started a newsletter earlier and then built up people who were interested in dinosaur content and maybe get a little feedback on what the show should be like. And then when we launched, we could have let them all know, like, hey, now you can listen to this show.
Yeah, I wish we had done beta episodes or whatever you want to call them. Sometimes they're called like negative episode numbers, but something where they're not in your actual RSS feed. But if you had that audience in a newsletter, you could say like, give me some feedback on this, because our first few episodes, we made some big mistakes and they're still our first few episodes. So some people, when they go in and they listen to episode 1 first,
we try to direct them to a later episode, but they don't always.
We added an episode 0 to sort of try to do this. And the episode 0 is half me saying like, if you want, you could listen to the newest episodes rather than the oldest episodes first. You might want to consider that. Or like our first episode's about T-Rex. We're like, we redid T-Rex in episode 200. You could go listen to that instead of episode 1. Like, a lot of people still start at episode 1. And yeah, it's better if you have a better product when you're first starting than just, putting your first attempts out there for all the world.
On the flip side, we've had a few listeners say that they binged us, like if they're going on a road trip, and they felt like they were growing along with us, because they could tell that we wwe changing and the show was evolving, and they felt like they were along for the ride.
Because in the beginning, we didn't know all the paleontology jargon.
No.
And we didn't pronounce everything right, and we were making mistakes.
We still don't always pronounce everything right.
That's true.
Why are they naming these dinosaurs with such hard names to pronounce?
Yeah.
I want to discover a dinosaur just because I could name it Bobosaurus.
I feel like there are some that are pretty easy. Like there's this dinosaur named Zool, which is just named after a Ghostbusters monster. It's just Z-U-U-L, which I guess is hard to read. But if you've seen Ghostbusters, then you know how to say it.
I was just in New York City last week and I was trying to figure out which one was the building that they filmed outside of. I'm like, is that it? Is that where Zool was? Would you say that the podcast market is saturated?
I'd say yes and no, because what were you saying, Garrett? Depending how you count, it's millions or hundreds of thousands of podcasts.
Yeah, there's a lot. So I don't know how market analysts look at things to figure out if there's like a number that's saturated. And there is some stuff going on now where basically things are getting aggregated. So you have companies like Spotify like buying people up, and that's something you tend to see later in a market. So maybe, but at the same point, I think if you can niche down and you have any sort of unique point that you're trying to make, which isn't just like, oh, I like that podcast, I could do the same thing. Like, that's not going to really work. We talk to people sometimes and they say, like, I have a lot of great ideas. I'd like to talk about this with my friend. And people like it when they hear my friend and I just chat about our days. I think the day for those podcasts, that is fully saturated for sure at this point.
I would agree. I do not want to hear somebody talk about their day. I have 2 kids. I get that already. And husband. Okay, Garret and Sabrina, for my fellow dino nerds, where can they find you?
The best place is our website. That's iknowdino.com.
As in, we know about dinosaurs.
It was an aspirational title.
And it rhymed and the domain was available.
Yes. You can also search for Dinosaur Podcast or I Know Dino on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all those places.
All right, you've heard from them. You've heard me forever. If you have a topic that you're passionate about, grab a mic and start talking. Share your information. Share your passion. Find your community. Become dinosaur experts. They are Garret and Sabrina. I am Mindy Jensen for the BiggerPockets Money Channel, signing off.